Two HBCU players made the Walter Payton Award watch list, but FAMU's Jeremy Musa was not one of them. Let's break down the two reasons on why that could have been the case. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Jarvian Gray, a.k.a. the mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum, and former TSU Herald sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. And thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. But remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S, ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more right now. When you bet on the Super Bowl winner, because it's football season, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Today's episode wraps up with a major move that Jackson State women's basketball head coach Tomekia Reed just made. Jarvian Howard is a player you need to watch out of Alcorn in 2023. But let's kick it off with the question that we all want to know the answer to. Was Jeremy Musa snubbed when it came to the Walter Payton Award watch list? There was two players who made that list. Jarvian Howard out of Alcorn, and then Davius Richard out of North Carolina Central. I would have expected to see Jeremy Musa on that list as well. It was, I think, 35 players. I think there was about 15 quarterbacks. I thought that he could have been one of those guys, but then I had to sit down and I had to think about it. Why was he not? Could I rationalize it? That's usually how this happens. When I hear something that surprised me, I'm okay. I didn't expect it, but I don't really do immediate reaction shows, so I have a second to think to myself, why was this the case? If I still can't figure it out, I'll come on here and I'll express my confusion. But I think I have figured out the reason that Jeremy Musa is not on the Walter Payton Award watch list, which is the watch list for the top offensive player in the FCS subdivision. And I think it comes down to two things: position and schedule. Now, I'll start off with schedule first. FAMU's schedule has been a talk of discussion for many. I'll tell you one thing I'm here to stop doing: criticizing their decision. I'm done with that. I have accepted that they have chosen to set up the schedule the way they wanted to set up the schedule because it is celebration, bowl, or bust. That's what it is for them. And you know what? I respect it, I accept it, and I won't criticize your intention. However, I say this to anybody FAMU related who has an issue with what I'm going to say. Just because I can understand why somebody did something, just because their reasoning is understandable to anyone, doesn't mean that it comes without consequences. And when you set up the schedule the way that FAMU did, there's certain things that you might not be privy to, certain things that you won't have access to at the end of the year. And I think that's national, really anything, but we'll focus on national love because we're discussing an award right now. See, I don't think that FAMU will be a top 25 team, because the thing about FAMU is FAMU doesn't have a great out-of-conference schedule. Their opponents are USF, which is South Florida, University of West Florida, and then they're playing Lincoln in California. USF is a good game. That is a good out-of-conference game. But the other two are Division II games. You don't have any FCS out-of-conference games. You don't even have one of your conference opponents who is masquerading as an out-of-conference game. You don't even have that. See, we talk about the FCS playoffs, and all FAMU fans will tell me, we don't care about the playoffs. That's fine. I accept that. I respect that. Won't criticize that. That's your intention. Celebration, bowl, or bust. Got you. But when it comes to national rankings, when it comes to FCS playoffs, there's something in there, something you don't get, but you've been okay with that. And now when you're looking at awards for your individual players, like Jeremy Musa, I think your schedule affects all of those things because one has to remember the SWAC is not the most respected conference. So you look at those 3 out of conference games: South Florida, West Florida, and Lincoln. Now, you're supposed to smash Lincoln and West Florida as a FCS squad. You're supposed to do that. That's not going to impress anybody. So now, essentially, you only really have the chance to show what you're about against South Florida. Now, we can get into things about how you feel about it, how I feel about it, but that's not what we're here to discuss today. I just think that we have to acknowledge the impact that the schedule might have on Jeremy Musa, because you look at Davis Richard. You have games against teams like Campbell, like New Hampshire in last season. That's what now he didn't do well against Campbell, but the point is you have these games that you play against these out-of-conference opponents that kind of validates you in the eyes of the nation. Understand, you're not looking for any of those things, but this is just what comes from it, okay? Like, I'm not trying to sit here. Don't tell me we don't care about national recognition. We don't care about that. I get it. 100%. I'm not saying that you have to, but I'm acknowledging and kind of trying to analyze why your quarterback, who I believe is a really good player, preseason SWAC Offensive Player of the Year, somebody I've praised multiple times on this show and said that he was going to get it well before he actually got the award at SWAC Media Day, or the preseason prediction, I should say, because it's not an award, the recognition. In the SWAC, he'll be good, because the SWAC only really cares about what you do within the SWAC. They don't care about your out-of-conference schedule. They don't care about any of that stuff. So you're not going to be held up to a standard by your conference, because all they care about is what happens in your conference schedule. You can be trash out of conference and play the worst teams ever. They won't care, right? If you come out and you smash West Florida and you smash Lincoln, well, they already expect you not to do overly great against South Florida. So if you just go with what's expected and then you excel, once you start playing Jackson State and you start playing Alabama State and you start playing Texas Southern, if you just excel in those moments, SWAC Player of the Year, it's there. But the other thing working against Musa is his position. I think that of the close to 15 players who were selected at quarterback, you would hope that he would be able to be one of them. But the truth is, Musa had 2,700 yards last year. Can he bump that up to 3,200? And is that going to be enough? See, that's the thing. Is it going to be enough with the schedule that you play? I don't know. That's the difficult part. Is he's playing a stacked position, and he's also playing a weak schedule. The only thing that matters to the SWAC when it comes to Player of the Year and things of that nature are really performance and the win-loss schedule. Your win-loss record, excuse me. But when it comes to everything else around it, that's when things go into the national level. And quite frankly, everything around it, that context, the strength of schedule, who you're playing, where you're playing them, just those things don't benefit Musa or FAMU, unfortunately. Doesn't mean that he won't have a great season. I predict that he will have a great season. It just means that nationally, he might not get that recognition, and that's the reason that he isn't on the Walter Payton Award watch list. I was surprised. I've rationalized it, but I think what really, really made me a little bit like, whoa, this is odd, is that not only was he the only one of the MEAC or SWAC Offensive and Defensive Player of the Year who didn't make this list, they had another offensive player from the SWAC who did, in Jarvian Howard. We'll compare these two and where they differ ever so slightly as we start the next segment, excuse me. But then we'll just go into why Howard is an interesting player to watch and why his role and his usage and his efficiency might turn around next year as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs, and Bird Dogs actually just sent me another shipment earlier this week. So shout out to Bird Dogs for that, always taking care of their own, and they're going to take care of you as well. Whether you want some joggers that actually are extremely well ventilated, they help you stay cool even in this summer heat. And I say that as somebody who is living in Texas, who knows all about the heat. You can get you some joggers, or you can go ahead and get you the shorts. They're good for your everyday errands. They're good for if you want to move around. They're good for everything, because I've told you once and I'll tell you again, I really don't like overly tight clothes. I don't like being restricted and not being able to move, but I understand a lot of people view them as stylish. Well, with Bird Dogs, you can get the slim fit, you can get the stylish fit, but you don't have to feel restricted. Slim and mobile. Let's go ahead and go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you go there, you can actually get a free white tech bucket hat with your purchase. So just go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day for my everydayers. On tomorrow's episode, we'll be breaking down a little bit why I find Southern's quarterback battle, I guess, not really, kind of strange. And you understand why I'm a little bit confused on exactly what it is on tomorrow's episode. But right now, I told you there's two players who made the Walter Payton Award watch list from an HBCU, Davius Richard and Jarvian Howard. Now, we're not going to talk about Richard. We actually did a full episode about Richard, I think a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to try to add it here. Is this the way? It's one of these ways, but I'm going to try to add something on YouTube that you can just click it if you haven't seen that episode. Timestamp that, right? So I can make sure that I actually put it up there. But right now, you're looking at Jarvian Howard, who, aside from being a Walter Payton Award watch list, because honestly, those national awards, they take care of themselves. Howard is just one of the most interesting players to watch in 2023 in the SWAC, MEAC, just really in the HBCU landscape, but specifically in the SWAC. Now, I do want to briefly discuss the differences between Musa and Howard, because Musa was given the preseason Offensive Player of the Year award within the conference. And it's not like Jarvian Howard plays in the OVC or he plays in the CAA or he plays in the MEAC. He plays in the SWAC. So you have one player who is a National Player of the Year award finalist, but he isn't the Conference Player of the Year. Let's break that down. All right, I've already told you the SWAC doesn't care about any of those things that the nation does care about. They don't care about those things. Those things don't move them. And that's because the SWAC respects itself. The nation doesn't really. Just being honest with you, the nation doesn't really respect the SWAC. The SWAC does. So whatever FAMU does within the conference is going to be paramount over everything else, right? That they're not going to worry about those things that I said in segment 1. But then also, you look at the fact that Alcorn has a good out-of-conference schedule. Alcorn faces Southern Miss, faces Stephen F. Austin, faces McNeese. All their out-of-conference games are FCS and up. And none of them are actually SWAC opponents. So you stepped out of what you usually face. I think that is a situation that's going to help Howard nationally. And then also, I think Jarvian Howard just stacks up against running backs better than Musa stacks up against quarterbacks. That's just the truth of the matter is. You look at Blue Bloods, to wrap this whole thing up, our guy, Blue Bloods, I love referencing people who are actually friends of the show. That's why you hear me reference Gerald Huggins. That's why you hear me reference Blue Bloods, because they put out a lot of great work. And we've seen them. We know them, right? So we're going to highlight our guys first and foremost. But Blue Bloods had Howard as a third team All-American. Not all HBCU, All-American. Davius Richard was a third team All-American. So basically, they're saying Howard is the third best running back in the country, and Richard is the third best quarterback in the country. So I think that Musa doesn't stack up against quarterbacks as well as Howard stacks up against running backs, right? And we also need to find some time to talk about Howard University's running backs, but we'll get into it. We will get into it. But overall, none of that. Now we're going to have a couple of mentions about his national standing, but this is no longer in relation to the award. This is just about how you need to watch him, because last year he had the 11th most rushing yards in the nation, FCS wise. And he also had the most carries in the nation. Now, I want to tell you why I think that the former will rise and the latter will drop. So I think he might have a better standing in yards, but he might not have as many carries. Now, that'll be something that's difficult to pull off, admittedly, but I have a path for it to happen. So last season, Jarvian Howard had 250 carries, which was more than over half of the starting quarterbacks in the SWAC. Some because of injury, some because of whatever, but it was more than players who played the whole season as well. Yeah, it was more than Aaron Allen, his own quarterback, by about 60 attempts, you know? But you're seeing just how much he ran the ball as opposed to, and I think even if you take Howard, or excuse me, even if you take Allen and whoever through, I think, the next amount, they're barely close to Howard. If they surpass him, it's by very little, no more than 10 to 15 passing attempts on the whole season. So that includes games where you're down, you're trying to play catch up. Jarvian Howard was the heart and soul of the Alcorn offense. I don't know if that is going to be the case to the same extent because Alcorn is in a quarterback battle. And whoever comes out of that quarterback battle, they might want to air it out a little bit more, especially if it's Macon, right? Especially if it's him because he's new to the system. So he might be like, you know what? We're going to trust our new quarterback to throw the ball more. I'm not saying that they're going to throw significantly more than they run, but it might just be a closer distribution because it was a vastly different. Like it was way different when you take not just Howard, but then the other running backs and the other running attempts. Even if you take the quarterback, I think Allen had 44 attempts. So if you put Allen's passing attempts with his rushing attempts and just put it next to Howard's rushing attempts, not even including when he touches the ball and passes, that still doesn't measure up. Howard still has the edge in that. So that just shows how much of a workhorse he was. However, the passing game wasn't overly efficient. If you get that better, boxes should lighten up. You might have more holes for Jarvian Howard to run through because less people are just sitting there waiting like we know what's happening. First down, we know they're going to run Jarvian Howard because we want to make sure that they're in a second and long, third and long, so now that they can't use Jarvian Howard. No more of that if the passing game is efficient. That's the important thing. When we talk about quarterbacks and the impact that they have on an offense, on a running back, you have to actually be good. You can't just exist. You have to be able to be a threat. You have to be respectable. Because if the only thing they respect is the running back, now you're going to be in a constant state of having to prove yourself throughout the whole season that you actually can make them back off. And until they do back off, Jarvian Howard's usefulness or his efficiency probably won't be as great. Now, he did average 5.1 yards per carry, but he was a big play machine, right? And I think you might see some of his lesser performances rise if the quarterback is better because now he can just be more efficient on a game-to-game basis. He might be able to hit off a couple of more explosive runs throughout the year. All of these things come from having better quarterback play. So Alcorn is a team that people are watching in the SWAC West heavily, especially with this quarterback situation. And we'll watch what the quarterbacks do, but we should also watch the effect that the quarterback battle and whoever the starter becomes has on the running game. And that's where Jarvian Howard comes from. He was representing Alcorn at SWAC Media Day with all of the Pearsons, all of the unique looks. He's a unique talent. I just can't wait to see exactly how he's used in 2023 and how it is compared to 2022. But one thing that has changed through the year is Tomekia Reed has made a major move, and we'll break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you've noticed, my energy has been different today, and that's because we have football on the horizon. I love football so much that I was excited for the Hall of Fame game, a game that nobody really cares about. I get excited about these things. Now, if you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you bet on who you believe the Super Bowl winner is going to be, every single time that they win a game, you get bonus bets. So this is something that not only affects you right away, this is a future bet that affects you every single week for the next 4 months, 4.5 months, right? So let's go ahead and get down and let's go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get on this extremely beneficial offer that is free bonus bets every time your projected Super Bowl winner wins throughout the season. All you have to do is go to the website. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Tomekia Reed has just made a major move, and she's now going to be a part of the NCAA Women's Basketball Oversight Committee, and she will still be the Jackson State women's basketball coach. So all JSU fans, you can breathe a sigh of relief. You didn't miss some sort of news that I was breaking to you that she was leaving the school and she's gone to the out of the mid-major ranks and gone to a upper D1 school. You don't have to watch or worry about that. She just moved to, not even moved on, but just kind of dual, multitasking, right? So let's just say she's multitasking, but she now joins the commissioner of the SWAC, Dr. McClleland, as a committee member. McClelland is on the men's side. He's been there since 2019. In this year, he will be the vice chair. It was announced last year, but his start date was this year. So this is a big deal. And I didn't see anything about a start date on Reed, on any of the articles I read about Reed. I didn't see that. So I'm going to assume this is starting effective immediately going into this upcoming basketball season. So 2023 to 24, she should be a part of the oversight committee. And this is big because you've seen McClelland take a step up last year. And maybe him having this position, he might have had a little sway to where he can say, we need to get Tomekia Reed, our top coach, onto this oversight committee. Now, these are two SWAC representatives, but at the same time, it's way bigger than that. It's way bigger than that. When McClelland got the vice chair, he was the first person from an HBCU school or HBCU conference to have that vice chair. Now you have Reed there. Now you have more representation. To me, I believe you should have HBCU representation everywhere. But I understand that's not realistic. But I want it as many places as possible. I want to see as many spots have HBCU leaders, HBCU voices, because oftentimes those are the only people who are going to speak up for HBCUs. And this goes for multiple small schools, the mid-majors. Man, mid-majors, a lot of mid-majors, not all of them, because in basketball, those FCS schools who are now D1, because in football, you're D1AA, now FCS, all of that. But in basketball, you're just D1. Like, that's why you're in the NCAA tournament. You're just D1. There's no real distinction. It's just we call you a mid-major. Man, a lot of those mid-majors going to get pushed to the wayside. So I think that there should be more representation. But it's Locked On HBCU. I say that all the time. You have to understand, some of my interests go beyond just HBCUs. Some of my mind be working. Sometimes my mind is working beyond just HBCUs, but I know how to focus it for the show. But you look at Reed and exactly what she'll do. What exactly she'll do is she'll be a part of enhancing the development of the public, enhancing the development and public perception of the sport, which I think that women's basketball is on an uptick. They are on an uptick right now after that NCAA tournament final between Iowa and LSU and everything that's come from it. I really can't wait to see what Caitlin Clark does on her way back. I've loved seeing what Angel Reese and Flage have done in the offseason since. I just think this sport is growing, and I hope to see LSU versus Iowa at some point, right? But she'll be a part of that. Reed will be a part of that as well. Then also, here comes some of the things where I think HBCU fans might be a little bit more interested. So, makes the recommendations, the committee does this, makes the recommendations to the regular season and postseason competition committees regarding such things as rule changes and administration of the championship tournament. And I think for those who want the SWAC and the MEAC to have more than one bid, this is important. She's not going to go in there and say, give us more than one bid. And they say, yes, Coach Reed. That's not going to happen. Let's just be realistic. That's not going to happen. I'm watching Warrior right now. It's probably my favorite show out. And there's this one character, right? I'm trying not to give you names, but this one character who represents the Irish, right? And they're upset that he's not doing enough for them now that he's within the political circles. But you have to understand, just being in a political circle, just being in a committee does not instantly get you exactly what you wanted. It doesn't immediately get the group everything that they wanted. That's something that the Irish are kind of struggling to understand in the show. But I hope that the HBCU fans understand this more within the framework of reality. And I feel very proud that I was able to get one of my favorite shows into this. Next up, we're going to get some way to put power into this. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we are. But the point is, with her being a part of these conversations, she can interject. She can actually give opinions, and maybe there are certain things, okay, I feel like this. The rebuttal is this. Now she can understand, okay, why don't we get more than one bid? What needs to change as a conference as a whole? And then she can spread that information to the SWAC. She can spread that information to the MEAC. They can work together to where they can both get maybe two bids, or maybe they get an automatic bid and then an at-large, or maybe the automatic bid is no longer in the first four every single year for the most part. Maybe those things happen, right? Because she knows what's wrong. she can actually give opinions that can change things. And both of those are part of the conversation. But remember, don't be like the Irish from Warrior and think that just because you have one of you in the committee, everything is going to turn in your favor. It's never that simple. And then lastly, the committee also looks for ways to enhance student athlete educational and athletic experiences. I don't know how many mid-majors are represented in the committee, excuse me. I don't know how many mid-majors are represented in the committee, but I want to see more. I would like to see a lot of them, right? And I'm glad that you have Reed there because she can represent the SWAC. She can speak for HBCUs in a general sense. And hopefully that affects them because a lot of times these committees, they improve things, but it's only for the upper tier. Having more mid-majors, having some more of the smaller schools represented in the committee will now help the smaller schools benefit from the committee's decisions as well. And I hope that you benefited from making this your first listen of the day every day. I know I did, from being able to talk to you for the last 25, 30 minutes. I greatly appreciate that. Now, on tomorrow's episode, we'll be breaking down the somewhat confusing quarterback situation at Southern University because I'm not sure if it's a quarterback battle or if Harold Blood really has the quarterback position. But we'll break that down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On HBCU. And in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.